Destination Africa, brought to you by Standard Bank.
Joining me now to discuss the opportunities and challenges in the ICT sector on the African continent is Sharoda Rapeti, Director at Deloitte TMT, Hennie Loubser, who's GM for Microsoft West, East, Central Africa and the Indian Ocean Islands. And then joining us from Abuja, Nigeria as well is Emeka Onyeama. He's CEO of Voix Networks. Thanks so much and welcome to you all in today's segment of the show. Certainly an interesting sector that we're delving into today. Sharoda, perhaps let's start off with you, because it's in this context that Paul Lee highlighted that we hear phrases like rapid growth in the ITC space being seen. Let's immediately bring here, what kind of investment levels we're seeing in this sector right now.
So the investment levels span across multiple industries, and we're seeing it in mining, we're seeing it in oil and gas, we're seeing it in even in the financial services sector. But most certainly hundreds of millions of dollars, which are changing by the year, of investment into infrastructure. And I think infrastructure is almost seen as the chaser investment, because following on from the basic infrastructure being put into place, then come the second layer investment into chasing that infrastructure across the two ends of the continent, the two sides of the continent, inland, as those connectivity chases via what we call as backhaul infrastructure, and off that then hang secondary and tertiary telecommunications and broadband services. So really, I think hundreds of millions of dollars is a close estimation.
Close enough estimates at this stage, Hennie, but even with that kind of investment, penetration remains low and therein lying the investment opportunity still. So let's take a global player like Microsoft. From your perspective, how do you read the investment case that Africa puts on the table?
Yeah, we think there's a massive opportunity for investment. Our first objective has always been to try and cover the continent as far as possible, to enable governments and organizations in the community with access to technology, and put some of those basic infrastructures in place, or the core infrastructure in place that Sharoda mentioned. I think that the next phase that we're going into now, though, is very interesting, because the notion of cloud computing offers a new way of approaching the deployment of these technologies, which means that Africa can leapfrog in many ways how quickly we can adopt, and therefore the investment opportunity now to take that leapfrog is quite significant, and we think that's quite exciting.
So to an extent, being behind the curve may well put us ahead of the game moving forward.
I believe so. Mobile adoption in Africa is significant, as we saw Paul speak about, and cloud services makes it more easy for people to access these services with mobile devices.
Well, we'll take a look at those new avenues that are popping up a little later on in the show. But at this point, Emeka, let's bring you into the conversation here, because we've certainly seen Africa become a choice destination when it comes to investing in the ICT arena. So while we've had issues like corruption, bureaucracy, poor infrastructure as well, and those being cited as major challenges and deterrents to FDI within this space, is that becoming an outdated story?
Yes, Alishia, thank you very much for bringing me into this program. I will certainly agree with you that corruption and all those factors you mentioned are no longer inhibiting factors to attracting foreign direct investment in Africa. And so far, there's so huge opportunity involved in it right now that we beckon on the whole world to come in and look into it, to establish it, and make sure that everything is working properly. So I don't see corruption or any of those factors as any longer an inhibiting factor in attracting FDI into Africa.
Of course, we've got some of those factors now slowly being washed away, and investors focusing on the investment merit more than anything else. But one of the big challenges that has persisted in the ITC space, Sharoda, has been that with the rerouting of the internet happening, outside the continent via satellites as well, cost has been a major issue. We've seen since the laying down of submarine cables, and that hopefully working to mitigate some of that challenge moving forward. Do you see this being the answer to that cost solution?
Most definitely, Alishia, over a period of time. But there's still a few decision areas which require strategic decision making at the leadership level, not only within corporates, but within at a government and a national level as well. So if I come back to foreign direct investment and I look at the BRICS equation and the BRICS alignment and the investment that's coming in from the Chinas, the Indias, leaders in software, leaders in the manufacturing of technology, what we seeing are some very interesting phenomena. The one is previously when developed markets and players in developed markets would run out of runway, and they would look to invest their money to a better return on their capital, and then they'd look to emerging and developing markets to invest that capital into. What we are now seeing is a shift in that axis, where emerging markets and developing markets characterized within BRICS are looking to invest their capital into emerging markets, because that is shifting the axis. So it's technologies that are manufactured within BRICS economies that are themselves creating a competitiveness of that ICT industry within the BRICS economies, and you are getting a critical mass uptake.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about 1 billion in population per continent, per each of those players. And so you're going to get the economies of scale from manufacturing through to deployment. So the other strategic decision that I would say needs to be taken at a government level of cooperation is also the technology standards. Because the more one harmonizes on those standards, then it will lead to the right economies of scale over a period of time.
Of course, with the laying of these submarine cables, I mean, we've had, projects to lay fiber optic cables inland being, coming to the fore in tandem. So how is that cost dynamic changing and influencing your business model at Microsoft, Hennie?
I think it's creating opportunities for everyone. I think most significantly is that we're seeing a new consumer segment emerging, where these consumers now can actually afford some of the technology in the form of devices, but also the connectivity or the access to technology. And I think that's very, very important and significant. It does mean that businesses then in turn will feed off that consumer segment and in turn create new revenue streams. And we think particularly the consumer segment and what that does from a technology perspective is going to drive a lot of what will happen in ICT in Africa.
Well, Voix Networks, Emeka, has been actively seeking investors to, to finance its planned expansion in Nigeria, and that to deploy a reliable fixed-line broadband network nationwide. What kind of response have you received? Because this is a project you've been running with for just over a year now.
Yes, well, we have received a lot of responses, and that goes to show that the climate is ripe for investment, especially in Nigeria. Like you see, there's a whole lot of broadband infrastructure, undersea cables, landing in the shores of West Africa. But the puzzle remains, how do we get these services to the last mile subscriber who needs them? So that's where Voice took into consideration and took that wide opportunity to provide infrastructure for last mile provisioning of broadband services. So as long as the fibers keep on landing at the shores, people can get access to those facilities and services and have access to better resources to play with in their homes and the offices.
Of course, for this project, Emeka, you were looking to raise, what, $50 million in tranches over 12 months. I mean, with that time frame having lapsed, what have you managed to raise, and what have been some of the key questions that have come through from potential investors?
Currently, we have not been able to raise any, but we have had a lot of prospects. People are talking to us on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. We also been on road shows, US, Europe, trying to get people sensitized in developing broadband infrastructure in Nigeria. It's encouraging in terms of response, but we have not gotten any actual funds. We are, so far using the local funds that we get from the local banks at a high interest rate to develop the infrastructure currently, while we are still seeking for core major investors from anywhere in the globe.
Hennie, has Emeka has highlighted they're encouraging in terms of response, but not really getting the funding just yet. What are some of the challenges to actually replicating successes in Africa despite this kind of investment potential it boasts?
I think there are still concerns around, regulatory concerns around compliance and business practices. I think it's real. The second one, I think, is one that we find is that you need to do more work to get people to understand the real opportunities and the magnitude of opportunities within the continent. When we look at when we started our business in Africa in '92, it was small and fledgling, but it took a lot of motivation to get people to understand the opportunity that there is. And I think that's the phase we're going through. I think it's natural, and I think it's just a matter of time before we break through.
Well, let's hit pause on that discussion for now. Of course, we'll be venturing into some of those opportunities when we get back. We'll be unpacking further the African ICT sector's investment appeal. So don't go away.